men thinking.
I'm Sean Broderseth, and I have been thinking about life. What a big subject to think about. It seems like so many of us are dealing with people who've passed away, I think more than many of us have in our lifetimes. Recently, a young man who had been part of our church and had moved on, a really lovely young guy, 25 years old. Something went wrong in his brain. He actually developed a cancer, and he passed away. So sadly, he had so many years ahead of him. Had to reckon recently with the death of a father of a very dear friend. This man passed away. He loved Jesus, and he passed away, I think, still with many years of fruitfulness ahead of him. Very, very sad. And then I had a great uncle in my family who died. He was one of 8 brothers. He was the last surviving brother. He was actually 92 years old. He was my grandfather's brother. And I've been thinking about his life quite a lot. He was a really faithful man. He was married to one wife. He loved her. He really did his best. And he spent most of his years just desperately trying to preach the gospel to anyone who'd listen. That was what he wanted to do in his life. He worked at whatever he could do. He was a pastor for a time, and he really just loved the Lord. And I was so moved by his life when he passed away to think of how this man, his name was Trygve. He was a big, tall Norwegian guy from the old school, and he just loved the Lord and wanted to share the gospel. And I thought of a story that he actually told me himself in his last years of life. He told me once about how his son had to go and walk around the streets, literally, in Johannesburg to find some Telkom. His son said, well, the Telkom lines are down. I'm going to walk around outside and find some Telkom employees and get this fixed. So he marched out of the house, went and got these 3 men who were sitting in a van, promptly brought them back to the house, said, will you fix this? Will you do what you can? And they ended up fixing it. And then my great uncle's wife said to them, now you must go through to the study, because she said the old man wants to speak to you. And even when he was bound to a chair because he was so old and frail he could hardly get up, he would make people come into his study so that he could talk to them. And so he started to share the gospel with these 3 men in Zulu, in their language. And he shared the gospel, and the whole time, he said, while he was sharing it, the oldest of the 3 employees, the Telkom employees, was just shaking his head. Just couldn't believe it. In the end, he said to him, are you okay? What's wrong with you? And the guy said, I had a dream last night that a man was going to share about God. He was going to explain God to me in my own language. And you're that man. And my great uncle led him to the Lord. The guy got born again. And I thought it was such a beautiful story. I thought, my goodness, if that ever happened to me, I would just drop everything and just write a book about it. That would be the greatest story. He literally just threw it out as though it was just something that happened to him the other day. He really loved God, and he loved to share the gospel. He wasn't a famous man. He wasn't known by many people. He didn't have some international ministry. Those who knew him really loved him, but he lived a life where he just gave himself. He learned other languages from other people so that he could speak to them in their own language and share the gospel with them in their own language. I was so moved by his life. And it just reminded me again that our lives are going to be measured by our faithfulness to God, our love for God, our desire to reach out to others, to share the truth with others, to save. Our lives are going to be measured by how we've been faithful with what God's given us. I really have been saddened by the loss of some very dear people to me very, very recently, and including my great uncle. He's a legend, and I'll really miss him. But again, strengthened in my resolve to be the man that God wants me to be the person that God wants me to be, to love people, to love God, to carry the gospel in my heart, to reach out to everyone and to use every opportunity. That is a successful life. No matter whether we have hit the targets that the world thinks we should hit, whether we have sat at the table that the world says you should sit at, but if we have honored God and we've loved God and we've done everything we can to be faithful in our own lives and to be faithful with this gospel that's been entrusted to us, God will be pleased with us. That's all that matters.
The end!